Man, I'm excited about today's podcast because I get to have a conversation with my dear friend and somebody that I truly admire. I'll tell you, you can tell a lot about a leader when you walk with them and you see how they handle different kinds of adversities and successes and victories and failures. And you see that character. And this guy is a tremendous leader. He's taught me so much. He's just a good guy. His name is Phil Marshall. And I am excited to hang out with Phil and talk today about crossing the line and see how Phil has crossed the line in his leadership from just leading with his head to leading with his heart, and how both are important. But I'll tell you a little bit about Phil. Phil is currently the Vice President and General Manager for NORDAM, manufacturing group located in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They're an aerospace company. He spent his life in that industry. He has led at some of the largest companies that you know and you've heard of, with United Launch Alliance and Boeing and others. And he's in his career, he's been a very successful, tremendous leader, but somehow has, through all of that, never forgotten who he is, and has always had that ability to lead from his heart as well as his head. I could go through a laundry list of his accomplishments. I could tell you all about his experience, but just know this: he's an executive, he's seasoned, he has all the awards and the accolades, but more importantly, he understands leadership, and that's what this podcast is about. So Phil Marshall, my friend, welcome. I'm so glad you're here today. Welcome.
All right, Larry. So good to talk to you. So good to see you. Hope everything is well with you and the family, especially in these challenging times.
Yeah, thank you, my friend. And it is, and it is very much a challenging time that we're in, and we all are learning and growing and listening and that kind of thing. And you're one of the best at that. So let me start because our listeners want to hear from you. But first, I have to know, how are you? Just tell me, how are you during these times, and how are things going for you?
Well, thank you. I'm doing well. I mean, all things considered, it's as we say, interesting times here in Tulsa. A lot of dynamics, a lot of visibility in the press over the last couple of weeks. But I'm proud of how Tulsa has handled a lot of that. I mean, it's keeping our chin up, so to speak. Family's doing well. I've actually had the ability to come into work every day because we're a manufacturing group, and we've tried to be aware of all the social distancing and that. So we've made our way through this. I can't believe that we're talking 120 days, but family is doing very well. It's nice when your kids are around you, and we've had kind of our own social group, which is just the family, and we're blessed to actually be in that situation.
So I just have to know, during this time, all of us have had to change and do things differently and that kind of thing. But during these last 120 days, what have you really enjoyed about that? What has been good for you during those times, during these last 120 days, as you've had to kind of change the way you work?
Well, you use the term enjoy, and I don't know that I actually have had that perspective of enjoyment other than probably the time with the family, because I think everybody gets so busy, your day-to-day activities, we're always doing something. But even probably that time to actually slow down a little bit, a lot of cooking at home and that social time where you're with that circle of trust. Of course, we have a grandson. He's just over 2, and he's lively, but the goodness is we're able to be there and see him and enjoy him. And I think that's where we're really blessed.
I thought that might be exactly where you would go. You've taken advantage of this time to be with your family, and that's awesome. It is weird to say enjoy, but I think it's been an opportunity for us to really do some things that maybe we wouldn't have had the opportunity to do, like be with our family, cook a little more, hang out with the grandchild. That's awesome. What are some of the things that, if you were just honest, and we're just talking about you for a moment in this time, that you've struggled with? What are some things that have been difficult for you?
From a work standpoint, it's interesting because when we first entered into this pandemic, this crisis, we tried to keep things operationally going, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure that we were taking care of our people. And so a lot of our support groups were all working remotely, and we learned to effectively work remotely over the last, 90, 120 days. We ended up having a lot of our folks come back really within the last 2 to 3 weeks. The challenge, one of the things I found is, we use the term boots on the ground and where you're physically there every day. And one of the things I found challenging was where we're seeing what's going on here daily, and it's hard for those folks that are remote to really understand the day-to-day interface. And so you have to have a level of patience and understand that they aren't there. And I always felt like I was blessed that I was able to come to work every day, right, even though, we're completely aware of what the environment is. But we did very well in terms of, not a lot of number of cases and taking care of each other. So I think it was having to have patience and understanding that just because somebody is not physically here doesn't mean that they don't care deeply in terms of things that are going on every day.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge that we hear across the country is how in the world do you stay engaged remotely? How do you communicate that collaboration and engagement? And we're learning but it's a new normal, and it's incredibly difficult. And you have and we'll talk about that later, but you have a huge responsibility there at NORDAM. I mean, you are the guy for the operations, and so that had to be a bit challenging for you to try to figure out how to lead this team when you guys have to have boots on the ground to touch the equipment to keep things going. I know that was difficult. I want to hang out for just a minute. I want to stop there and hang out with you to talk about these times that we're in, to pick your brain a bit, and then we're going to talk about you personally. But I really respect your wisdom. And Phil, talk to us a little bit about where we are in terms of this era of racism and awareness of racism. And you guys have been in the middle of some of that in Tulsa, but rather hear from you personally, your heart and your thoughts around where we are and what we can do about that.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure how qualified I am to address that, but I'll give you my feelings. I mean, number one, the things we heard from Bruce Jones and Rebecca is tremendous. The one item I take away is as a middle-aged, more senior white man, I'll never know what those people of color have to deal with. I grew up in a very small town in the mountains in Colorado, and it was very white. And so although we've got good friends, racially diverse, I do not know that. And the idea that I would ever have to worry about my sons walking or running through a neighborhood and potentially getting stopped or hurt, that's a very big concern. And I think that we often like to talk, but if we're talking, we're not listening. And one of the things that I think you had helped me with was active listening. I think we joke about it as I have a black ball on my desk that I call my listening ball. I'm going to grab it because it's right here.
That's great.
This is my listening ball, and I have to be very deliberate on that because I will have a tendency to express my opinion, especially when I'm leading. And so I deliberately try to grab my listening ball. And it means while I'm holding that, I'm holding it now. I should be listening and not talking. But is to illustrate a point is that if we can actively listen, and actively listening to me means you ought to be able to repeat back to somebody what they said and make sure that you understand them and that they got their point across, because we all have a paradigm, this pool of knowledge that we bring to a conversation, and it's based on past experiences. And it may not be completely accurate. And so until we can understand both sides of that conversation, we're doing ourselves and each other a disservice.
Yeah, I think you're so wise, and it does start with listening. And I love your tool. I think that's awesome. I think that as two white guys, we're sitting here talking, having a conversation about something that neither one of us have experienced. I think, but here's the thing. I think we can still make a difference in this arena by listening and learning and using our influence when appropriate to attack this evil thing called racism.
Absolutely.
But I think it begins with having conversations that for years we've been uncomfortable having, right? We've been uncomfortable. And what was it like in Tulsa? Talk to me just a little bit about the culture there in the last week or so. What's going on in where you live and your community, and how are the people there responding to the limelight, if you will, that they've been put into?
Yeah, it was very interesting. We were out of town. We were actually in Colorado, and driving back when we had a number of these rallies that were going on. As a matter of fact, I think when they had the presidential rally, we were driving back into town at that time. And the one thing I will say is that, as opposed to other areas within the country, it was very, for the most part, very peaceful, very respectful. You still see where there's not active listening going on. And you see that on the news, but it's not necessarily representative of what, there's always the rest of the story. I always liked back in the day, Paul Harvey would have his radio show, and it would just be the rest of the story. And I think that you have to dig a little deeper. You have to really understand what's going on in the community. And so for the most part, I think Tulsa navigated this as well as can be expected. Now, unfortunately, we had yesterday in the news, we had 2 policemen shot, and they are in critical condition, and it was by a white man, and they captured him. But, my heart goes out to all of our, the policemen that are there to protect us and serve us. And then they're not quite sure how to act right now because there's so much scrutiny, where at the end of the day, they're still trying to serve us. And so I think that, having that active dialogue once again, I think that that's very helpful. And I like to think that Tulsa is setting a stage in terms of how we can be, as opposed to where we are, looking backwards.
Yeah, I think you're so right. I love that, where we can be. And is it too lofty a goal to say that we're going to eradicate racism from our culture? Maybe, but it's not too lofty a goal to say we can try, right? We can certainly go after that. And then also to understand how to have better dialogue and appreciation and training for the police force in our area. So
That's right.
We're trying to balance that, and we've done some things in our company here to both undergird and encourage our local policemen, and as well as our community at large, and as well as some of the underserved communities. We've tried to be active in that, and I think that's what we have to do from our perspective. Have you noticed, Phil, in your company at NORDAM, has this affected the culture there with the employees?
Well, how can it not affect the culture? But there's a really good example. There was an article that came out, this was 3 or 4 weeks ago, where the CEO of American Airlines was flying on Southwest and had a dialogue with one of the flight attendants on Southwest, and he was reading a book, and forgive me, I don't remember the title of the book, but it created such a big impact to our CEO, and she sent a message out, and we saw the dialogue on it, and people ordered the book. I mean, and we did it for free. I mean, we bought copies of this. I still have to go do my homework and read it. But the idea, once again, was there was an African-American flight attendant flying for Southwest. She didn't know who this individual was that was reading the book. Turned out he was the CEO of American Airlines. Her mother worked for American Airlines, and so they entered into this dialogue, but it was that interface of where the point is, it all starts with having a conversation.
Yeah.
We all bring a paradigm, your past experiences into anything that we do, but until we once again start that active listening, you got to get beyond yourself. You got to get beyond your preconceived notions of what you're bringing to the table.
Well, such wisdom, and in our vernacular, for our listeners, Phil is a turtle. He's a tranquil turtle, and he's a lion. And so he kind of bounces back between those two personality traits. But what happens is a tremendous amount of plethora, if you will, of wisdom that he can give us. So thank you for sharing about a difficult topic. I want to just kind of turn the corner, if you will, and I want to talk about you. I want to talk about what made Phil feel, and kind of get into that just a bit. So take us back to your childhood. Who was Phil Marshall? Where did you grow up? And what are some things that you learned growing up that made you who you were today? But let's who you are today. But let's start up with, where'd you grow up, Phil? Tell us about your childhood.
So I grew up in the mountains west of Denver. Elevations 9,100 feet above sea level.
Wow.
I consider myself a native Colorado, although I was born in Jackson, Wyoming, because it happened to be where my dad was working that summer when I was born. But my family was all, grandparents were all born in Colorado, and that's where I grew up. Small town in the mountains. The joke is, don't blink or you'll miss it. It's about 160 people, and we probably have half as many dogs. If you added the dogs in with 160 people, we might get to 240. And at the time, you really think, well, okay, I had a normal childhood. But the thing that, as you look backwards, it's like, well, unless you've been exposed to something different, then whatever you have is normal. And I considered ourselves middle class. We probably weren't tremendously well off, but my mom was a school teacher. As a matter of fact, she was my kindergarten teacher.
Wow.
And one of the first doses of reality is when I had to go to kindergarten, and instead of calling her mom, I had to call her Mrs. Marshall.
Oh,
and there were repercussions did I not say Mrs. Marshall. And so setting expectations there. But yeah, small town. We kind of went to county elementary schools and ultimately county high school. My dad actually started out, he was working at the ski area. He was running a ski shop. And then he and my mother got divorced, that was traumatic. I think I was around 6th grade at that time. But I will say that from a family perspective, they did their best to make sure there was continuity for my brother and me. And so I don't think we felt the downside of the divisiveness that you could see within that, anytime a divorce or that type of thing comes into a family. But we actually had a chance to travel because my dad and my stepmother worked for the airline. So, we had a chance to do things probably my peers in a town of 160 people didn't have a chance to do. It's hard to say that you're worldly when you come from a town of 160 people.
Right.
But, went into, high school. I grew up about 10 miles from a ski area. So I started skiing when I was 2 years old and joined the high school ski team. Was not necessarily a stellar athlete. I played football, but I was so small, I think that they just needed me to hold the football as opposed to run with it. But skied from, all through high school, and that's kind of a different sport, especially throughout the country, because, there's very limited that there's that many people where you would actually even have a high school ski team.
Right.
Did that. I actually was in the high school band. I played the trumpet, and turned out I ended my high school. I was second in my class, which at the time you think that's a big deal, till you realize that second in the class of 85 people is not that big a deal. It just kind of is what it is. And that was I'll tell you, Larry, that was one of my first doses of reality. Is I'd actually planned to go to college out in California and had been accepted out there, but I got an in-state scholarship and went to Colorado State University. And when I got there, as opposed to being exceptional, I found out I was within the engineering school, I was just average. And that's a real wake-up call when, you've been doing well, your grades are good throughout all high school, how hard I had to work. I mean, it wasn't extremely hard, but now you just become average. And so that was a real wake-up call for me. That was the first thing of where you go, wow, you're not as great as you think you are.
Right. Right. A good lesson learned out of that childhood. And that certainly was one lesson. What, think about something that occurred or that you grew into to get some of these characteristics that you have right now in your leadership. Can you think back at this small town guy who loved to ski and grew up in, with dogs everywhere, but what characteristic would you say, or characteristics would you say you developed or you gained from growing up like that in Colorado?
Well, you mentioned my personality. I don't know whether you're the smart one on this, or whether you grow into a personality, but certainly just having a few close friends in a small town, probably that's where a little bit of that turtle comes in. But at the same time, learning to, we had to do a bunch of different things, like especially in high school, is you were in the band, you played football, you're on the ski team, academics. And so associating yourself with different groups of friends, and kind of mapping out what it is you want to do. My parents set very high expectations for me. I mean, they're demanding, but I'll tell you, there's one story that still stands out to me, and you'll laugh at this, but I mean, it's still very, very visible to me. And this goes back, I was staying with my grandparents who lived in the same town, and we'd be playing outside, in the summer. You're outside from the time you get up in the morning until it gets dark. And one of my best friends, they found this wallet, and his parents ran a country store and gas station. They found this wallet that somebody must have dropped. Well, instead of turning it in, he hid it, and he shared it with me. He said, "Oh," and there was like maybe money in it. Well, I think we got tattled on, and my grandparents took the two of us down to the police station, which actually was 2 miles away, and made us go in, and they talked to us, and it's like that lesson was firmly established. And so you want to think that that's over. And my parents had gone out to dinner or whatever, and I was hoping that, I could stay at my grandparents that night. Well, they got home and found out what had happened. And this was just finding a wallet. We didn't steal it. We just found it.
Right,
didn't turn it in. Well, my father comes in, and God bless him, he meant well. He pulled me out of bed, and he made me walk home in front of the car with the lights on, saying, "If you're going to act like a criminal, I'm going to treat you like a criminal."
Oh, wow.
So obviously that could be considered. I mean, it's funny now, and I use this in terms of some of our ethics training, because it's like, look, you're always being watched. But that was somewhat, I call a defining moment, because it's like, well, I'll tell you what, I find $1 on the floor now, I will go turn it in to somebody and say that, because that it's firmly grounded in terms of this is how you act. This is right and wrong. So I until you actually even asked that question, I'm not sure that I could have articulated that, but it kind of popped into my mind saying, yeah, that was kind of a defining moment in terms of, foundationally who I am today.
That's a powerful life lesson, Phil. Thank you for that. That's amazing. And then so those values, those characters, that work ethic, the honesty, all those things continue to mold it, continue to grow in you and make you who you are today, which is awesome. Let's fast forward, and now you're in college. Talk to us a bit about what you learned and what you took away from college that has helped you to become the leader you are today.
College was I got a degree in mechanical engineering, and it was difficult because I was not very good at going in and asking for help. I never had to do that in high school. It just, some of the things seemed to come naturally, and really struggled. And then I will tell you where the defining moment was. I met my wife, and she was also in mechanical engineering. And as we started to go out, we were starting to date, but we started to study together. And as a result of that, my grades got better because I actually had a study partner who then became my life partner. She graduated about 6 months before I did. because, you know, the way your schedule goes, I had about 8 credit hours I still had to pick up. But we both graduated with degrees, and she ended up getting a job out in Los Angeles working for Northrop. And thankfully, I was able to get a job there as well. And so after we graduated, we were in California for about 3 years.
So you met your beautiful wife, and you did what all smart guys do. You married her. You didn't let her get away. That's congratulations. See, that what a great leadership moment.
Yeah, obviously I'm the smart one in that relationship, because I found something went after that. But yeah, I'm still blessed. I mean, we've been married 35 years.
I wanted us to walk through some of that. And by the way, congratulations, 35 years. That's amazing. Congratulations on that relationship. That in and of itself takes a ton of hard work for any relationship. So thank you for that. And I wanted us to walk through that just a bit because you've navigated some storms in your life. You've had some hard days, and I think those things that built the foundation and who you are and your character are important to understand just a bit about where you've come from. But talk to us about navigating some of the storms in your life, Phil.
Yeah, I don't know what initially storms are normal. You know, you've got work challenges, you've got family challenges, things like that. But I think over my career, we were in California for about 3 years, and then our family was all in Colorado. I had a chance to go back to Colorado, and it was working for, it was McDonnell Douglas had opened up a plant building Delta rockets. And so I was privileged enough to be in the rocket business for a good 25 years. And I had degrees of success. You know, you end up doing whatever, you're recognized for your accomplishments for doing things, and then you get more responsibility, and ended up running a plant in Pueblo, Colorado. And then ultimately we had the chance, the opportunity, we didn't necessarily recognize it at the time, to move to Decatur, Alabama, where we had the Boeing facility, which I ended up taking over. And that was all, it's kind of scripted, and there's challenges, there's bumps in the road that you run into. And then we became United Launch Alliance, which I think, obviously still is there in Decatur. And probably one of the biggest challenges that you walked with me through that was after we had successfully gone through moving work down to Alabama. Essentially, I was told that I was kind of no longer needed. And I still remember we were at it was a leadership session. For whatever reason, it always seemed like I had to follow Dave King. Dave would get up and give this eloquent, talk, inspirational. And I remember he talked about where there's times where within an organization or whatever, for the good of the organization and the good of the individual, sometimes we have to set people free. And it sounds like, okay, you're firing somebody, but it really is setting them free to go fit in better. And I remember I got up right after that and said, well, I've been set free. And it's very emotional at that time, because you're going through you use the term storm. It's the turbulence of what we're dealing with. I'm the feeling of I'm no longer valued. And, that's the near-term emotional side of it. Hindsight, as I look back 8 years or more, is, part of it is just running a business. And what you really have to determine is where you are within that organization. Is it a good cultural fit? And it probably was not the best cultural fit, because part of the leadership values at the time of where we're going were not necessarily in alignment with me. And I, as I look back, I know that I was not performing at 100%. As a matter of fact, I think you and I had discussed, there's a book a colleague gave me at the time. It's called Multipliers. Liz Wiseman is the author, but it talks about under a good leader, you can actually get 120, 140% out of a group. But the other side of that is a leader that's a diminisher you'll only get about 60% out of the people. And it really resonated with me. But, you know, as I look backwards, was I using that as an excuse because I didn't fit in? And ultimately what you find out is that if you can, number one is always finish the job, never give up. And I did. And ultimately I was offered another position within the company, and, you know, things worked out. But it was also at the time where the self-analysis was, well, maybe I'm not fitting in as well as I should, although I love the business that we were in. And that's when I had a chance to come out here to Tulsa. And one of the values of the organization that I work for is that of serving leadership. And it just felt right. And, you know, we've had our own challenges that we've navigated over the last 8 years, but at the same time, when you feel like you're contributing and adding value, then that's where the fit is. Versus, you know, not everybody's going to fit into every type of organization, and it has to make sure that your values and where you see yourself leading are in line with that, or it can create that uncomfortable condition. You never want to be in a situation of where you're blaming somebody else. I mean, we have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to hold people accountable. But at the same time, I think you've heard me use this term, we deserve what we tolerate.
That's right.
And so if I don't do something actively about the condition I'm in, and it is difficult. I mean, I essentially went up through the ranks from McDonnell Douglas through Boeing. I mean, I never really had to apply for a job, only a couple times. And it's not a case of entitlement, but you feel like you earn it. But at some point, you're going to go in and say, well, it doesn't fit. And until you actually can take a step away and look at the entire picture, you may be too close to it to be, you know, can't see the forest because of the trees.
Okay, so unpack that for us just a bit. Someone has just been terminated. They've been with a company for a long time. Let's say, you know, years. They hold a position that they work for, and they've just been told, we no longer need your services. What would you say that some of the most important things that they can learn, do, takeaways? What are some things that you can say to them? You've just lost your job. You've just been set free, as Dave said. What would you say to them, Phil?
First thing that I would say is something that, you know, I think you and I discussed is no one else controls your attitude. Only you can control your attitude. So whether you're optimistic, pessimistic, no one else can impact the way you deal with that other than yourself. And so if you go in with a positive attitude, a commitment, you know, there may be a couple of leaders who you feel may have let you down, but there's a lot of other people that are still relying on you. So finish the job, you know, and work through that. You know, you can get up every morning and say, this day is going to be better than the last, or you can get up every morning and say, man, I don't even want to get out of bed. But we choose that. It's up to us to choose how we navigate that. But you also have to have a very good support structure and sounding board, and that's where, you know, we've developed our relationship over the last, you know, 18, 19, you know, 17 years, of where you have got to be able to go in and have somebody where you can have honest and frank discussions, and also someone to hold you accountable. I mean, I always expect with you that if you say, Phil, is that really right? And we have to be a little more thoughtful of it, and, you know, analyze how we're, you know, you can't, if you want to go in and fool yourself, that's fine, but you're not going to actually mature as a leader.
Wow.
The way you would want to.
Own your attitude. You get to control it, finish the job, create a support structure that holds you accountable so you can hold yourself accountable. Great stuff, Phil. Phil, you should write a book. That's awesome. Good things. And the name of the book you said that helped you through that, just so we can make sure we capture that, was Multipliers. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Great.
Multipliers.
So take us now into, you're in this organization, you know, you're a VP over, millions and millions of dollars of revenue generation. Help us to know some things that we need to know. Not all of us can do that. Not all of us can lead at your level. But what are some tips that we need to know as leaders that would help us where we are in our leadership, you think?
So one thing that, as you go back, and you still have to constantly analyze where you are and what we're doing for our people. I mean, as a serving leader, it's not about me. It's about how do I make people better. And I think one of the most difficult lessons I had to learn was how to let go. And what I mean by that is, if you're recognized for your accomplishments, for your deliverables, for what you analyze, for what you build, et cetera, it is very difficult to be able to relinquish that control to help develop your people. And so, although that, I've never asked someone to do a job, even if it's out in the shop, that I'm not, at least not willing to try myself. I may not be the best at it, but I'm willing to try to go do that you're not above it. I had, when I first got to NORDAM, I went through and I shadowed everybody, one day a month, just to make sure I understood what people were working on. And that was somewhat selfish, because it was just about me trying to learn the business. But at some point, you've got to be able to go in and say, okay, I know how to do this, but I really need to actually hold my folks accountable and help guide them through doing that, because then you start to develop a stronger team. If you're always doing it yourself, we love as leaders, I think we get in this syndrome. I don't like to call us arsonists, but we love to firefight, because it's that hero syndrome. Man, I came in, I solved this. And you have to know when to say, no, I've got to be patient, number one. I've got to allow people to come in and try to work through this, because if I teach them, then we've actually got that power of the organization of where they're coming in and everybody improves. You're pulling people up versus just doing it yourself. To me, that was one of the more difficult lessons I had to learn of, sometimes you got to take a step back.
And how, Phil, help us to know, how do we know when to step back? How do we know when to step up? How do we know where we need to be in that? Is there something that you kind of use to know? Because I know this about you. You walk the shop floor. You taught me that when you first came to NORDAM. You said, I've got to earn the right to lead these people. And you did that by walking through the shop. And I even have gone with you, and I've seen how they respond. The team members respond to you because you take the time to stop and visit, and you took the time to learn what they were doing, to actually learn the skill set, and so you could educate yourself and earn that ability to lead. But how do you know when to do that? How do you know when to walk the floor and to get involved, or to step back and give that leadership away? How do you know?
Well, I think you have to differentiate between leadership visibility and approachability, meaning that you're out visible, people know that they can talk to you. There's going to be times where it's urgent, you have to have leadership get involved, and we become very tactical. And the tactical side of it is sometimes you just have to go get things done. You've got a deadline, you've got a deliverable to either your boss or a board of managers, et cetera. But when we can actually get into that strategic mode, saying at what level are we leading at, the strategic mode is when we can actually take a step back and, as leaders, paint a vision of where we want to be, whether it's 3 months down the road, 6 months, 2 years, versus what do I have to deliver within the next 5 days. So I think the timing on deliverables, that helps set priorities. But it also has to do with how you've been able to build a team. If you've got a team that you trust and inspire, or they inspire you, then it's a lot easier to relinquish that control. If you don't have that trust of the people that are working with you, your colleagues, then people feel a lot of times that they have to go do it themselves. And you've met with my leadership team and my peers, and the more that we actually have that level of communication where we break down those barriers, we establish that trust, now you're starting to get to where there's that open communication. You use the term vulnerability. And I think being able to show that we're transparent, we don't have a separate agenda, we're willing to be vulnerable, I think that's how you earn You don't demand respect with a title. You earn it by your actions.
So, and I have watched you develop this culture, if you will, of transparency and vulnerability. But how long did, because, leaders want to go, we want to go in, we want to move, we want to get things done, we want to pull people around us and go. How long did it take you, though, to build that team around you and to earn the right to inspire them and to earn their trust and for you to trust them? Give us how long did it take you to build that culture that you have now on your leadership team?
Well, it went probably through a series of building trust. I mean, when I initially started out at NORDAM, so that was 2012, I think when I was able to actually bring you in and people knew that this was not, the latest touchy-feely, let's all do a group hug, that we were actually getting some mileage because people were putting their barriers down. I think that took us probably about 24 to 30 months.
Yeah.
But once you have that, and that established a very solid leadership team, and then as all of our responsibilities started to expand, that helped establish the trust as we brought other people into that fold, into that dialogue. So as opposed to, well, there's this brand new program that Phil Marshall is trying to bring out, a good half of our leadership team has been doing it for the last 8 years. And so it's really where we start to say, hey, there's more of the same, and people now it's more where we're trying to be inclusive. There's a desire for that level of development, which is completely different than our normal business acumen, operational execution.
It's amazing to me that 24 to 30 months, that takes discipline, it takes patience, it takes consistency, and you were willing to invest all of that to get the product, if you will, the team, the cohesiveness, if you will, that you have today. So you had to be very intentional about that this wasn't just by osmosis. You came on day one and started building that culture, right?
Day one is probably pretty strong, Larry, but probably I think within 90 days we had an idea of where we needed to go.
I love your humility, Phil Marshall. I love it. You just an amazing leader. Talk to us a little bit about, though, even you at your level of leadership, you have to lead up. You have people you report to, your CEO, that kind of thing, the board. Talk to us a little bit about how have you managed. You're the new guy. We're the new guy when you came in years ago, parachuting in. How have you led those above you?
Well, I think once again, it starts out with establishing trust. My boss needed to know that she could trust that I was very deliberate in my intentions. Being visible out on the shop floor, I think, had a lot of impact. But it still takes development and coaching. I mean, once again, I'm going to hold up the listening ball. I've got to be very deliberate on active listening. And so I've had to be very, very self-aware in terms of my interaction and interface. And then, as you navigate some of the internal storms that we've been able to see over the last 4 or 5 years, you always want to look at in your organization of who are your go-to people. And depending on what the situation is, there's different needs. But I think that's the main thing is if I earn the trust of my boss and trust of my peers, knowing that I don't have a separate agenda, that we're still looking out for what's good for not just the company, but our stakeholders, because it really is, we look at it as an expanded family. I think that to me, that's one of the biggest things. There's no separate agenda. Be transparent, be authentic, and be who you are.
I can tell you because I have, I hear this theme as we talk, and I've worked with your team that you lead, and I've had opportunity to work with the CEO, your CEO, and she trusts you incredibly, and your team trusts you incredibly. And that's the pattern that I'm seeing as we're talking today is you're a master at building trust with those around you. And you want to speak to that for just a minute? Is that something that just happens, or are you intentional about building that trust for those around you?
Wow, that's difficult, because I don't know how you can be deliberately saying, I'm going to go make you trust me. I mean, to me, trust is earned, right? And it's through your actions. probably less about your words, but do what you say you're going to do. Admit when you've made a mistake. I mean, to me, that's one of the biggest things that I can always do is say, hey, I'm seeking input. This may not be right. And any action that we see within an organization, moving people forward, even if it may be the wrong decision, at least when they see decisiveness and action, that's goodness. But you've got to be willing to raise your hand and say, hey, I think we made a left turn. We should have made a right turn. Wow. And be willing to back up and reconsider that. And then from a process standpoint, make sure you don't just tolerate it, but understand what was the condition that made you make that decision to turn left instead of right. I don't mean that, politically, obviously. It's more just that juncture where you say, which way do we go? And what is the data set that we're using? It's interesting. We always want to be, especially within operations, you're people of action. But I've had to go in over and over and say, let's make sure what's your problem statement? What problem are we trying to solve? And taking that time out to really make sure we clearly articulate or define the problem, because we all think we've got an answer, whether a machine is broke or whatever it is. But unless we have a chance to really look at the whole data set, be data driven, understand the facts, a lot of times we're going to come in with this on preconceived notions based on our past successes or failures. And we got to be very cautious about that. And I think that the thing that I love about the team here is we are really trying to be data driven. You have to have that heart, and you have to have that emotion, but at the same time, you got to make sure it's the old Dragnet show, just the facts. I mean, let's not let the facts get contaminated by, other agendas or how emotional we get about a certain topic.
You have to know how to cross that line from your head to your heart and your heart to your head, back and forth, don't you?
Well, you mentioned crossing the line when we first discussed this. I'm going, now, my boss says, we want to make sure we're maintaining our ethics, and not only do we not want to approach the line, I want to stay 6 feet behind the line. And so when we say crossing the line, but it's, as you said, it's between your head and your heart. And I think that that's right, is the time that we can actually balance that out. We talk about work-life balance, but that's the same thing. It's your emotional and your mental balance in terms of how you proceed. And, there's always going to be times where we kind of get, I get fired up about stuff, and then you have to take a step back and say, well, is that really necessary? What type of example do we want to set for the rest of our team?
Phil, you are always amazing to me. I could visit with you forever, but as we turn the corner to close this podcast, if I'm an aspiring leader, if I'm in the workforce, I'm trying to make my way, I want to grow, I want to learn, what words can you give us to the inspiring leader who's listening to this podcast?
Have I ever talked to you about the twins? This is in a good sense. The twins are tenacity and perseverance.
Oh, I love it.
And I like to talk about the twins because it's like, number one, never give up. There was a quote, and I'll forget who was. It says, we may end up seeing failure, but tenacity and perseverance are going to actually drive us forward until you start to blame somebody else. And if you're blaming somebody else, then you're no longer taking accountability for your actions. But I think that you've got to be willing to ask for help. And it's very difficult for us to go in and ask for help. But most leaders are willing to give you the time if you're willing to ask for help and guidance. I mean, I don't know of anybody that I've run into that if you say, hey, I need 15 minutes of guidance or coaching, and people like to share their wisdom, but don't be afraid to ask for help, because if you don't ask for help, you don't get to choose the help you get.
I love it. Amazing wisdom. And last but not least, if you find a wallet,
I'm going to turn it in. I'm going to broadcast it. They just have to tell me the serial numbers of the dollars inside it, and everything will be all good.
You're right, in order to claim it. Oh, you've been a joy, Phil Marshall. Thank you for giving us a bit of your time. And I know you're very busy and a lot going on, and for you to invest in others like this means a lot. Thank you. I certainly appreciate it. Any last words you'd like to say before we leave today?
Well, Larry, just thanks for the opportunity. It's a pleasure. Always enjoy our dialogue. I learn something every time we talk. I know that hopefully it's mutual, but just this has been very enjoyable, and hopefully there's a couple of nuggets that people can take away. Thank you.
A ton of nuggets today, Phil, and it certainly is mutual. Thanks again, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Larry.